busy English railway station, a police investigation leads to a baggage room. Inside an ordinary suitcase, horrifying secrets.
In it, there was a gun, a kosh, various sex magazines, a copy of Mein Kampf. But the most damning and most important piece of evidence was a tape, a 1/4-inch reel tape.
On the tape, a terrified girl begs for her life.
This little girl is asking not to be tortured, screaming for a mummy and asking to go home. It was awful.
A woman's voice can also be heard, torturing a young child to death. Her crimes will shatter a nation's innocence. Her name is Myra Hindley.
Pepsi Watson, Crime and Justice TV, broadcasting today on 6th of July 2019 from South London in the United Kingdom. Good evening, everybody. This video is a global media public statement to convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley's supporter and self-proclaimed criminal justice commentator Joe Chapman. Excuse me. So, who is Joe Chapman and how did we lock horns today early this morning? Joe Chapman is a former prison officer who worked in the prison service for 24 years. Excuse me. Convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley's supporter, Joe Chapman, is also a qualified group therapist and counsellor. At the later part of his career, Joe Chapman became a prison consultant, helping convicted sex offenders to achieve release from prison. Joe Chapman publicly supported the release of convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley in her attempts to secure release from custody, which was vigorously refuted by ministers Michael Howard and later Jack Straw. At the time of Myra Hindley pursuing release from prison, expert leading forensic psychologists and criminologists condemned Myra Hindley's attempt at rehabilitation projection as a prolonged and sophisticated attempt at manipulating the authorities into releasing her. Myra Hindley was described by leading psychologists, criminologists, and respected journalists as the embodiment of evil, the personification of evil, and ultimately as pure evil. Mainstream media have only ever referenced Myra Hindley in mainstream press and media with the qualifying adjective evil. Convicted child sex torture killer supporter Myra Hindley, Joe Chapman, on the other hand, in an article published in The Independent on the 19th of December 1995, in a response to the public outrage triggered by Myra Hindley's letter to a newspaper in which she claimed that she took full responsibility, publicly stated that Myra's letter was from the heart. Alarmingly, on scanning over in meticulous detail the Facebook page of Joe Chapman, one theme that I identified was a quite disturbing fondness for child sex offenders. For example, in a Facebook post on 29th of March 2018, Joe Chapman said the following: "There were people who minimized and justified their own crimes by attacking sex offenders, believing it gave them some sort of superiority. I've always challenged this mentality and always will." Again, on the 24th of April 2018, again on Facebook, convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman publicly denounces and attacks paedophile hunters. Paedophile hunters whom have successfully achieved hundreds of convictions between them for child sex grooming of children as young as 8 years old. In the Facebook post mentioned, convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman states the following: regard paedophile hunters. Paedophile hunters, which many senior police officers, I might add, not all, but many, have praised for their work. This lynch mob mentality is a dangerous and ultimately unhelpful activity. Chapman's disturbing rhetoric goes on and on. He publicly claims that all house burglars are borderline rapists and that drug dealers are worse than child sex predators. Worse. And it goes on and on and on. You know, anybody who is immersed in my channel and all my subscribers who watch Crime and Justice TV regularly, you know that I'm very firm on my kind of against the grain, against the tide, demonizing mentality. For as long as we continue to demonize, the opportunity to learn, understand, and potentially prevent a heinous crime from happening again is missed. Yet, at the same time, every few years in Britain, there are certain crimes which trigger such a fierce, overwhelming wave of public disgust and outcry that there is no coming back from the crime committed. Crimes that I'm referring to are usually crimes that involve the rape, sexual abuse, torture, chopping up of bodies of toddlers, babies and children. So it is a fact that, considering convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman's alarming and disturbing public support for Myra Hindley and his, again, disturbing attempts to encourage the state to release Myra Hindley, coupled with his clear and obvious public statements which excuse child sex abuse against children, finalised by his later career work in supporting and encouraging the British state to release into society multiple convicted child sex abusers, one must seriously question the motivation and the thinking behind the public support for those convicted of the most heinous, sickening and utterly indefensible, abhorrent crimes against babies, toddlers and vulnerable innocent children. So, who is this convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley who Joe Chapman so outspokenly and publicly supported? And what did she do to become the most hated woman in the entire history of the history books of Great Britain? Background. Between July 63 and October 1965, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley carried out the Moors murders in and around Manchester, England, killing 5 children aged between 10 and 17, Pauline Reed, John Kilbride, Keith Bennett, Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans, and sexually assaulting at least 4 of them. 2 of the victims were discovered in graves on Saddleworth Moor, and a third was discovered there in 1987, more than 20 years after Brady and Hindley's trial. It is suspected that Bennett's body is also buried there, but despite repeated searches, it remains undiscovered. In 1966, a tape recording of Leslie Ann Downey's terrified last moments was played to the all-male jury at Chester Court years after her callous murder. The Telegraph reported at the time, for its 16 minutes, the people in the courtroom sat still and silent. Sir Elwyn Jones, QC, the Attorney General, who led the prosecution, said the voices of the man and woman were those of Brady and Hindley. Setting the scene, Sir Elwyn said there were various noises, sounds of a door banging, crackling noises, heavy steps across the room, recording noise, followed by a blowing sound into the microphone, and then footsteps. Then there were the voices of a child and a woman, A child screams and cries in a man's voice. At one stage, the girl said she was called Leslie Ann. The man said he wanted to take some photographs. The Telegraph reported that the tape was played at full volume, a loud scream echoing through the courtroom after several minutes, during which only the footsteps and soft voices in the background could be heard. As the jury had been warned, some passages were harrowing. The phrases, "let me go" and "please" were audible, and also, "don't undress me, will you? And I want to see my mummy." At one point there was a blowing sound into the microphone and a child screaming, "Don't," and "Mum." The tape ran on. "Woman, Hindley, shut up, child. Please, God, help me, please." "Woman, come on. Child, please, please, no." Then faintly, "Help, I cannot while you have got hold of my neck," followed by a scream, a child's scream. "Help," followed by a gurgling noise. There were screams and gurgles, a child screams and gurgles. "Woman, Hindley, sit down and be quiet. Man, Brady, go on." At another point, the woman said, "Hush, hush, shut up, or I will forget myself and hit you one. I will hit you one." In another passage, Leslie Ann pleaded, "Can I tell you summat? I must tell you summat. Take your hands off me for a minute. Please, please, Mum, please. I cannot tell you. I cannot breathe. Please, God." "Why? What are you going to do with me?" "Man, I want to take some photographs, that is all." "Child, I want to see my mummy. Honest to God, I swear on the Bible, I have got to go because I'm going out with my mum. Please, please help me, will you, man? The longer it takes you to do this, the longer it takes you to get home." "Man, the longer it takes you to do this, the longer it takes you to get home." At another point, Brady said, "If you don't keep that hand down, I will slit your neck." As the Telegraph noted, the court was still and quiet. Suddenly, a child's scream and a cry filled the entire courtroom. Now, how did I and convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley, supporter Joe Chapman, lock horns today, which resulted very quickly in Joe Chapman saying I should die of lung cancer, and instigate 2 Facebook comment threads totaling over 40 comments in which he publicly announced he will be attempting to have me returned to prison, potentially for the rest of my life. So, as everybody on my channel Crime and Justice TV knows, and everybody who knows me well, I'm on an IPP license. The IPP is a banned and Strasbourg-condemned barbaric death machine which has cost 140 people their lives since implementation in 2005. After the landmark Strasbourg ruling, in which the European Court of Human Rights condemned the sentence as inhumane and arbitrary in November 2012, successive failing justice secretaries with no legal qualifications between them and with backgrounds in Edwardian Elizabethan history and agriculture and fiddling expenses have refused to address this shameful stain on the British justice system retrospectively. As such, near 70% of the current 2,500 IPP population are self-harming and slashing their legs, faces, eyeballs, genitals and throats, and are so bleeding out in our Victorian and draconian barbarous penal system as they endure catastrophic breakdown in mental functioning. As such, also, any IPP whom has somehow miraculously successfully overcome the near impossible state-controlled and state-designed parole board release test, as is the case for me, we live in constant fear of indefinite recall to prison. Every complete stranger we meet in life has complete and total power over us. The feeling this invokes in us is one of utter despair, helplessness, an intense and violent helplessness. This feeling triggers poor mental health and intense prolonged suicidal ideation. PTSD, hyperarousal and intrusion can and is triggered at any time, and at any time or place can you be shocked into a hyper-arousal state of flashback, panic, a dark and frightening despair, and 1,000 forms of the most, what I can only describe as crippling fear. This can and does happen at any time. It can happen in my sleep. It can happen on a bus. It can happen in a civilized, normal conversation in the kitchen in the daytime with a housemate. When we are in disagreement or conflict with others, such as Joe Chapman, as is this case, who are fully aware of the power they hold over you due to the mental torment of IPP, they use it against you in merciless execution, which is evidenced by their immediate, transparent, direct attack on you using the devastating weapon that is IPP against you. Recently, on Twitter, I was in another argument with a barrister and former prison governor and police advisor. As soon as I challenged them with truth, for truth is my foundation, for I am the way, the truth, and the life, for truth is what I argue, and as soon as these people receive a dose of the truth, they never respond to truth or respond to the argument that I delivered to them. They attack my character. The barrister and former prison governor then proceeded immediately to orchestrate me returning a plan to have me return to prison and discussed fitting me up in court on Twitter. The persecution continued, and very soon after, another police officer stated, "Does anybody know where he lives? Because I can send a few people around to deal with him, no questions asked." This morning at 8:39, Joe Chapman on Facebook shared a post in which he praised criminal justice professionals. In the post, at 8:39 this morning, convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman stated, "Well done to ISIS unit and all others. This occurs each year throughout the prison system and needs more recognition." This referring to outstanding prison and probation officers recognised and commended for outstanding work rehabilitating prisoners. It was at this point that I engaged Joe Chapman with a dose of truth. I responded as follows. Meanwhile, short tariff IPPs with dyslexia, autism, deafness, speech impediments, learning difficulties, grey, gaunt and delirious, suffering catastrophic breakdown in their mental functioning, 10 years over tariff for, in the wider spectrum, low-level offences, carve chunks out of their throats, wrists, legs and genitals, gouge their eyes out and slash their throats. Decent dose of propaganda though, Joe. History will judge current barbarous Tory government as modern-day barbarian killers. And may karma continue to affect the conscience of Sonia Crozier and Glenys Stacey for the ocean of blood that stains their hands for eternity. Yet may those with pure hearts continue to shine in the sunlight of the spirit and be given strength always to build structures in modern society to ease the immeasurable mass human suffering inflicted upon the tens of thousands that continue to be impacted by the modern Britain rogue state criminal justice system. A criminal justice system that has no regard for human rights or even human life itself. God bless the soul of Zahid Mubarak. Convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman responded. Pepsi Watson, Jesus Christ, pause for a breath, man. Why would you want to piss all over the good work done by men and women in the prison service, which prisoners benefit from? I won my award in 1993, having worked tirelessly over many years with prisoners and their families, many of whom remain good friends of mine. It is not propaganda at all, but clearly I don't expect all bigoted conspiracy theorists to applaud it. Just use a bit of common sense, boy. I then responded with another dose of truth. The truth is hard to accept sometimes, Joe, I understand that. Secondly, self-proclaimed criminal justice expert commentators are part of the problem, not the solution. Ian Atchison, Martin Neary. Part of the problem, i.e. resided over a penal system with near 90% recidivism for young offenders and sick, racist child abuse murder, as was the case with Zahid Mubarak. Be reassured, sir, common sense will be used in ways you may never comprehend. For as long as there is air in my lungs, I will not rest until all guilty officers involved in this racist child murder are convicted in the dock at the Old Bailey for conspiracy to murder. You, Joe, deserve your award for your tireless work ethic influencing the transforming of lives, which, as you know, impacts not just on the prisoner's life, but on those all around the prisoner as well. That said, your award does not change the fact that embedded into the very culture of all modern British young offenders institutions, prisons and the Ministry of Justice and HMPPS is the disease of institutional racism, a culture of child abuse and a culture of perceiving all prisoners as subhuman. Ian Atchison, Martin Neary, experts in criminal justice? No. Experts in failure. Experts in near 90% recidivism for children and young offenders. Experts in 45 to 60% recidivism for adults. Experts in child abuse. Experts in racist child murder. You, Joe, have not ever seen a short tariff deaf IPP 10 years over tariff in a prison healthcare unit, grey, gaunt and skinny, screaming and crying, carving chunks out of their face and genitals, screaming into the night with catastrophic mental health delirium. I have, Joe, and some things can't be unseen. The internet, Twitter, Facebook is full of probation service and Ministry of Justice propaganda. And I have exposed it on my YouTube channel, and I'm not even warmed up yet. Stay tuned on Crime and Justice TV, Joe. Unable to digest this mammoth dose of truth, convicted child sex torture killer Myra Hindley supporter Joe Chapman then attacked my character, further stating, Pepsi Watson, you talk as if I've not witnessed all of that and have not fought against it all. In fact, being eventually medically retired and almost sectioned due to my efforts. You seem to think that your campaign efforts require some sort of automatic respect, but how can I respect anybody who attempts to use this post as a platform for a good rant? Carry on blowing smoke up your own arse. You may still get lung cancer that way too. It was at this point that I disengaged from discussion with Joe Chapman. Joe Chapman then proceeded to incite a vicious hatred toward me via the Facebook comment thread, invoking comments in which they continued to slander and attack my character and begun a discussion to attempt to have me sent back to prison potentially for the rest of my life. For example, Natasha Maroni and Sara Liam Mimi Oskie proceeded to call me a nasty piece of work, vile, a crazy man and a damaged man. I agree with the last part. I am a damaged man. I've lived in concrete tombs for prolonged periods of isolation, living with cockroaches and drinking toilet water to survive after being tortured and beaten by prison officers. Inevitably, this abuse affects you later in one's adult life. I am healing. I am a work in progress. And I remain proud. I remain proud of my continuing progress and remain proud of my character as a 37-year-old man. Despite my past experiences with torture and systematic physical, sexual and mental abuse at the hands of sadistic prison officers at Aylesbury Young Offenders Institution in 2001. The comment thread incited by Joe Chapman continues, where they begin a discussion about my real name, where I live in London. Then they discuss planning to have me detained in custody indefinitely. What's interesting at this stage is, in the thread, the entirety of the content is actually false testimony, or non-truth, or lies. For example, they say I'm at Speaker's Corner all the time. I've been twice in my entire life. They say my 40,000-word polemic I wrote in prison regarding the IPP sentence, called IPP the Trilogy, peddles all sorts, when in fact this polemic is a high-level, sophisticated, academic, critically acclaimed masterpiece exposing some of the worst human rights abuses inflicted by any state against their own people ever seen before since Nazi death camps in Germany in modern European criminal justice and political history. Natasha Maroni, Sara Liam Mimi Oskie and Ann Horton continue to lie about me and slander me, with Joe Chapman carefully observing from a distance but then offering clever kind of timely interjections where he fuels the fire and incites hatred and encourages the plan to have me sent to prison indefinitely. What is critical to observe at this juncture is this. Former prison governors, this is very important, please concentrate. Former prison governors, former civil servants like Joe Chapman, former chief of parole board Nick Hardwick, barristers and so-called academics such as Harry in bed with the enemy Aniston, and other academics from Goldsmiths, Southampton University and other top universities, all of these self-proclaimed criminal justice commentators are in bed knee-deep with the corrupt Ministry of Justice and are rewarded with the potential prize of OBEs and knighthoods and such like, same way as we knight sexual predators in modern England, such as people like Sir Jimmy Savile. At the same time, all of these self-proclaimed criminal justice commentators meticulously control the very lifeblood of the post, after the effect, media, hysterical, stridence and sophism, counterfactual, dangerousness, renaissance, post-Sarah Payne, post-Jamie Bulger, politicisation of law and order era. The minute, the very moment, the very minute that the mainstream media trigger mass public hysteria in the press via targeting high-profile criminal cases, all of these commentators make their moves immediately. Yeah, the very moment, within seconds, they make their moves immediately. As such, they cleverly and expertly control the activists, the reformers, any reform type non-mainstream groups, any up-and-coming academics or next-generation prison officers, social workers, police officers or mental health workers, and it is highly effective and so contributes to the continuing absolute and utter decimation of our once great criminal justice system, and inevitably continues to cause major loss of life to children and adults and immeasurable mass human suffering to tens of thousands of people. Absolute power always corrupts. Absolute power always corrupts. This is a fact of life. Ministry of Justice and British state-neutralised academics are even instructed to adapt their research findings. Adapt their research findings. I have this on 100% authority. I reiterate, repeat, adapt their research findings to consistent with current political ideology or agenda. And this is despite the fact that academic and forensic psychologist ethical codes of conduct are very strict, thorough investigation, honest testimony, yet they adapt their research findings under instruction of the Ministry of Justice and the British state to comply with any particular specific current political ideologies or agenda. Big fact. big dose of truth there, if you can swallow that. At this moment in time, there is progress materializing all over the world. In America, they are reducing isolation in 30 states after acknowledging the Quakers experiment as a catastrophic failure. After the horrific and horrifying Kalief Browder case at Rikers Island in New York City, former President Barack Obama passed legislation to end isolation for children in the American penal system. And Kalief Browder's family continue to push for this legislation to be passed through. They are legalizing cannabis all over America, and big hitting podcast hosts such as Joe Rogan and Iron Mike Tyson, they openly smoke weed on podcasts. Live on air. They are legalizing cannabis in Canada. In Holland, they are closing jails because there is nobody to put into the jails. In Portugal, we have seen the biggest drop in recidivism the modern world has ever seen, due to legalizing up to 10 days personal supply of all drugs. As a result, burglary is down, violent robbery is down, murder is down, shoplifting is down, health is improved, overdoses are down, drug deaths are down. Norway are leading the world in prison reform, with recidivism at the lowest of anywhere on the planet at between 17 and 20%. What is Norway's secret blueprint, master plan, secret, that is influencing these phenomenal low recidivism statistics? They treat prisoners with dignity and with respect, and they accept that you go to prison as punishment and not for punishment. And the Norwegian state accept that no matter a person's background, all humans are work in progress. Think about that. The Norwegians accept that all human beings, no matter their mistakes, are all work in progress. And like I said, we have to be real and realistic, and there's always the exception to the rule. That one case every few years that there's just no coming back from, i.e. chopping up, raping and torturing 4 or 5 children like Myra Hindley. Hardly rocket science, is it? Their master plan in Norway, leading the globe on penal reform, their master plan involves treating prisoners with dignity and respect. Recall, I said progress all over the world. In Saudi Arabia, the king has allowed women to drive for the first time in history. Women are now allowed to attend music concerts and sporting events. Of recent times, world-famous female music artists have been allowed by the Saudi king to perform live for the first time ever in Saudi Arabian history. Despite as many as 36 recent public executions, the above mentioned is progress. That can't be denied. That is truth. There is progress, and it is this progress that we must and we will build on. Meanwhile, in modern 21st century Britain, short tariff, post-tariff IPPs with learning difficulties, autism, speech impediments and deafness, grey, gaunt, skinny and delirious, 10 years over tariff, are slashing their throats in our draconian penal system. Once deceased, they are zipped up in body bags and thrown in the back of white vans like pieces of meat, and the families are not informed for sometimes weeks. Then, the British state and the Ministry of Justice sends their highest, most sophisticated thinking, most experienced level Queen's Counsel barristers to the coroner's court inquests, and then they proceed to embark on a 2 to 3 week campaign of demonising and condemning the deceased man, woman or child, slandering them in front of the deceased person's family, saying stuff like they were faking their mental health, they were a dangerous criminal, and covering up the what I would argue is a state-sponsored killing, because even on the continent's toughest prison in Vladimir Putin's Black Dolphin, the right to life is protected and it's impossible to commit suicide. These families, I might add, on the receiving end of this modern day barbarism, have no access to legal aid because of legal aid cuts. They are lambs to the slaughter, and the memory and legacy of the death of the child, man or woman, is just, you know, disgracefully disrespected. Also, Crown Court rape cases all over England are of recent times been collapsing due to the police and the Crown Prosecution Service admitting that they have been hiding evidence that would have proven innocence to influence a higher rate of rape convictions success and to satisfy modern current political agendas. And a lot of these cases, men have gone to prison for double-figure sentences for rape who were completely innocent. And some of these have appeared on the BBC Victoria Derbyshire show early in the mornings. A conveyor belt of dead children fills the morgue, delivered in the back of blacked out white prison vans at 3 or 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning as we sleep in our beds, oblivious. At the same time, VIP elite paedophile ring whistleblower Melanie Shaw, controversial political figure Tommy Robinson, and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange are hauled before secret courts in London with no jury and are then tried, convicted, sentenced, and on a prison van to high security prisons and hospitals, all within a 60-minute period, with no court proceedings consistent with legal protocol, no pre-sentence report, no expert evidence from psychologists, criminologists, or even any witnesses. These high-profile figures are then detained in high-secure institutions, sometimes indefinitely, on prison landings full of child sex killers, serial killers, cop killers, and terrorists. This is despite never being at any stage convicted of any offence that carries more than 12 or 24 months, or at any stage ever being convicted of a violent offence. Welcome to modern Britain, the rogue state of the modern Western world. Repeat, the rogue state of the modern Western world. Big fact, big truth. Evil is not the scary man that jumps out of a bush on Clapham Common with a balaclava. Evil is dressed in the finest suits, they drink the finest brandy, smoke the best Cuban cigars, and they articulate and express themselves in the most articulate and well-spoken and finest Queen's English. Moving on, going back to Joe Chapman. I forgive you. I forgive you. I wish you good health. I wish you prosperity. I wish you blessings. I wish you long health in your retirement. I wish you safety and security with your mental health, because you mentioned you had some mental health problems. I wish you all the best with that, as I do all of your close family and relatives and friends and all the people that you love and care about. You are welcome. You are welcome into my home here in South London anytime. I will share food and water with you across from my table. And you know what? Not only will I do that, it will be a privilege and a pleasure to do so. I forgive you. I love you. I love you by recognizing myself in you. I love your assets. I love your faults. I love you, Joe Chapman. That said, my mission is to spearhead the biggest and greatest campaign in global criminal justice history and to rid the barbarous penal and criminal justice systems of the United Kingdom and the United States of America and beyond of the sickening, utterly indefensible disease of institutional racism and child abuse in youth custody. This mission is a cause that I believe in, a cause that I'm dedicating my life to, and a cause that I've already made great sacrifices to pursue from the very moment that I awaken each day, and for 16 hours each day, and for 7 days each week. I immerse myself in the service of others, and I do so to protect life, to protect human life. As such, I will not be threatened and intimidated with indefinite recall and allow you to use the IPP sentence against me, Joe Chapman. I will not be intimidated and threatened by you or any other former civil servants, barristers, police officers, or any of your Facebook cronies. I will not allow you to attack me in this manner and leave my family feeling vulnerable and scared. I fear not one of you, for even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for he, his rod, and his staff, and his angels comfort me always, always. My heart is pure, pure, and I am and will continue to be the truth and the way and the life, and I have felt the presence of divine intelligence, and I live my existence in the sunlight of the Spirit always. I represent truth. I am truth. I fight for truth, and I fight not only for truth, but for the greater cause of justice, fairness, reason, the common law of the land of Great Britain, individual liberty, freedom from discrimination, and very importantly, proportionate justice for victims of crime. The proportionate justice of victims of crime that victims of crime deserve. And it is the victims of crime that I aspire to be the very core and foundation of the modern criminal justice revolution that I am spearheading globally. I love my enemy as I love myself, yet so this is also true. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. Lead me, follow me, or move aside. If you attack me, then I will engage you. As I am engaging Joe Chapman right this very moment, I will engage you. I will engage you in a new breed of deep web digital activism of which this world has never ever seen before, and of which shall shake the corridors of power both at Capitol Hill and also Westminster of the British state. I will do so whilst exercising all democratic freedoms and laws in which I enjoy. And for as long as there is air in my lungs, and for as long as the magnificent sunshine shall rise in the east and set in the west, I will continue to fight to protect life. And I will continue to rock the corridors of Westminster to inspire the hearts and minds inside Westminster. May the Lord grant us faithful parliaments and a quiet realm. sure defence against all enemies, fruitful lands and prosperous industry, wise counselling and upright magistrates, leaders of integrity, in learning and labour, a devout, learned and useful clergy, honest, peaceable and dutiful citizens. May wisdom and knowledge be the stability of our times. May wisdom and knowledge be the stability of our times, and the fear of the Lord our treasure. Yet make no mistake that within the cyber world and digital realms, I will continue to fight against evil from a standpoint of truth and a standpoint of good against evil, because this is what it is. It's a fight between good and evil. There is unity in the infliction of oppression, and so the resistance to oppression requires unity also. We shall unite in a common bond of togetherness and unity, and I will flood all European capital cities with activists. I will swarm the capital of England with a new breed of modern-day activism never seen before. We shall suffer in silence no more. Our attack will be swift as the wind. We shall march calm like the forest, in defence as a mountain rests firm, like darkness impenetrable to the enemy. My movements shall be swift like the lightning, and for as long as the honey-seeking bees shall align with the celestial sun, justice will be done, and justice will be seen to be done. For in the words and wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King, freedom is not, has never been, and never will be free. Freedom must be and will be demanded by the oppressed. And so critical to my mission is the demanding of freedom. I'm going to finish with an extract from IPP, the trilogy, in which Sara Liam Mimi Oskie is stating which peddles all sorts. So she obviously hasn't read it. The extract reads as follows. Whether I rise from my knees, my broken mind and body shining forth, being as the morning, or whether my fate be to succumb to the merciless death machine that is IPP, my legacy shall be this. One, of wanting to make a difference. Two, if need be, sacrifice for the greater cause of good, fairness, justice and truth. To inspire truth in others, for others to know that we may all be the truth and the way and the life. To inspire this essence identity of an infinite eternal description of love. To inspire the wisdom that to love is to see ourselves in others. And if all fails, if fairness, truth, good and justice do not prevail, if justice is not done and not seen to be done, then at the very least may hope be given to the slaughtered minds of the disappeared. And may at least one of these lives be saved. Joe Chapman, I forgive you. I love you. And it would be a pleasure to share food and water with you. If Joe Chapman, Ann Horton, Sara Liam Mimi Oskie, Emma Wells, Wendy Carson and Natasha Maroni succeed with their plan in having me detained indefinitely, I will be detained at HMP Belmarsh, HMP Brixton, HMP Pentonville or HMP Wandsworth in the capital. Please write to me and support me. I'll put contact links in the video description. Within 24 hours of detention in custody, I will publish a political statement to the British government using my mainstream journalist contacts. That will be all. I'm Pepsi Watson. This is Crime and Justice TV. I wish you, as always, good health, prosperity, blessings, and as always, most importantly, may you continue to love by recognizing yourself in others.
You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind. You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind.
Y'all see him in the street struggling, young, dumb, and thuggin', give a fuck about nothing. Stuck at rock bottom, trying to come up on something. Pumping from sundown to sun up, he hustling. Vision, my nigga, now get in where you fit in. And see prison as just a high cost of living, the life. Ante up, cause if you blow that dice on that OZ, Dorothy ain't going home tonight. That's on everything. Put it on the kids and the white. Been burying my folk ever since they raised the price on the coke. Searching for a quick antidote. More money, more problems to cope.
You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind. You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind.
On rainy days I sit back and count ways on how to get rich. Coolin' with a mean, ill Jamaican bitch. Banana coat matching with the ratchet. Low black weed, sweatpants style. Air Forces acting, jumping the 6 kicks. Lil' Chris talking about the bird. Float through your hood in the mean tents, that's giant. It's like the family that flipped on you for lying. Buried you alive, left your whole crying. We on your floor, look, more dogs. They ain't A either, I hope y'all niggas is on. And when we get there, all my niggas in the mix, yeah, Shalal Legs. Diamond got me buying Louis Switch. Yo, bro, people say the clan was missing since I got dropped off a radio. Overnight, your whole style was bitten in the process. Everybody switched their names like, what you call it, and he Fast King James. It was the guards that repped that. Shaw-skin, dark-skin bitches, Clarkson, Dizzy, left the game dizzy. Who got busy? That dancey shit slid through. We had to stay hooked, cause that's what we been through. RZA came through, mastermind, got the cash from power. Poop the power past it, divine classical rhymes, mathematical rhymes. Styles unbearable, now niggas with the radical shine.
You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind. You believe it's morning, I'm alive, but that's the last thing on my mind.